the night was quiet. The streets were almost empty. A cold wind moved through the narrow lanes of the city. Most people were asleep, but in one small neighborhood, light suddenly filled the darkness. Red and blue flashes broke the silence. The sound of police sirens cut the night open like a knife. Neighbors peeked through windows. Some stepped outside, whispering nervously. Police cars stopped in front of a small apartment building. The doors slammed open. Heavy boots hit the ground. Officers rushed out, moving fast, their faces hard and focused. This was not a normal visit. They were here for someone. On the second floor of the building, a man sat alone in his room. His name was Daniel Cross. He was 32, quiet, and lived by himself. Most neighbors barely knew him. Some thought he was strange, because he rarely spoke, rarely smiled, and often walked late at night. But no one thought of him as dangerous. Daniel was drinking coffee when he heard the sound. At first, he thought it was far away. Then, he saw flashing lights outside his window. His heart skipped a beat. He stood up and walked toward the door just as a loud voice shouted, "Police! Open up!" The knock was not a knock, it was a heavy, booming strike. The door shook. Daniel froze for a moment, confusion flooding his face. Then he whispered to himself, "This can't be happening." The door burst open before he could move. Officers stormed inside, guns raised, lights blinding his eyes. Daniel raised his hands quickly. "Wait. What is this? What's going on?" On the ground. Now, one officer barked. Daniel dropped to his knees, his hands above his head. His voice was calm, but filled with disbelief. "You've got the wrong guy." The neighbors outside gasped as they watched through the windows. To them, it looked like the police had caught a dangerous criminal. Officers pulled Daniel's hands behind his back, locking cold steel cuffs around his wrists. "Daniel Cross, you are under arrest," one officer said. Daniel turned his head slightly, his voice steady but strange. "You're making a mistake. I didn't do anything." The officers didn't respond. Two searched his apartment while the others pulled him to his feet. Inside, the small apartment looked normal at first. But on the desk were scattered papers, photographs, and notes filled with numbers and symbols. One officer held them up. "What's this? Codes? Maps?" Another officer frowned. "This looks bad. Very bad." They found pictures of locations around the city, times written in the margins, and names circled in red ink. To the police, it looked like the work of someone planning something dangerous. Daniel shook his head when he saw them take the papers. "You don't understand. That's not what it looks like." But no one listened. The officers dragged him down the stairs. Cameras from curious neighbors recorded everything on their phones. The flashing lights, the shouting, the image of Daniel being shoved into the back of a police car, all of it spread quickly across the street. Daniel sat in the back seat, his face half hidden in the shadows. He looked calm, almost too calm. But his eyes were sharp, and his lips moved silently. He seemed to be repeating the same words, "Not me. You'll regret this. Not me." As the police cars pulled away, a woman across the street kept filming. She zoomed in, and on her phone screen, she caught something strange. High above, on the roof of a nearby building, a small camera lens reflected in the night. Someone else was watching. Someone who was not the police. At the station, the officers pushed Daniel inside and sat him down in an interrogation room. The room was cold, the walls gray and bare. A single camera blinked in the corner. "Sit tight," an officer muttered. Daniel leaned back, his hands still cuffed. His eyes never left the mirror on the wall. He knew someone was watching him from the other side. He smiled faintly, almost as if he was in control. In the other room, Detective Harris studied him carefully. Harris was a man in his 40s, tired eyes, rough beard, and a deep voice. He had been chasing criminals for 20 years, and he thought he could read people well. But this man, this Daniel Cross, felt different. He doesn't look scared, Harris muttered. Not even nervous. Another officer shrugged. Maybe he's a pro. Maybe he's done this before. Or maybe, Harris said slowly, we've got something wrong. The younger officer frowned. What do you mean? We had a witness. The sketch matches his face. And look at those papers. He's planning something. Harris didn't answer. He just kept staring at Daniel through the glass. Back in the room, Daniel spoke for the first time since arriving. His voice was calm, low, and controlled. You're wasting time. Every second you keep me here, the real danger gets closer. The officers exchanged nervous looks. What are you talking about? One of them asked. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes sharp. You think I'm your criminal. But I've been chasing him too. That's what those papers mean. Not plans. Not crimes. Warnings. Silence filled the room. The officers didn't believe him, but a small seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, outside the station, the woman's video of the arrest had already started spreading online. Thousands of people were watching, sharing, and commenting. Some said Daniel looked guilty. Others said he looked innocent. But hidden in the background of her video, a sharp-eyed viewer noticed the same thing she had, a reflection on a rooftop, like a watching eye. Someone was out there. Someone who didn't want Daniel taken away. In the dark corner of the city, a man sat in front of multiple screens. He had been watching everything, the arrest, the interrogation, the chaos. His lips curved into a cold smile. They finally took him, the man whispered. Good. Let them waste their time. The game continues. On one of the screens, Daniel's face stared back at him. Calm. Defiant. Almost as if he knew exactly who was watching. The small gray room was silent. Only the faint hum of the overhead light filled the space. Daniel Cross sat at the metal table, his wrists still locked in cuffs. He looked tired, but his eyes were steady. He didn't shake. He didn't sweat. He didn't even look afraid. Detective Harris entered the room slowly, carrying a folder under his arm. He pulled out the chair opposite Daniel and sat down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Harris studied him carefully, searching for signs of guilt. Daniel broke the silence first. You're wasting time. Harris leaned back, folding his arms. Funny. That's usually what I say to people like you. I'm not people like me, Daniel replied calmly. The detective raised an eyebrow. That doesn't even make sense. Daniel smiled faintly, but his voice was steady. It will. When you understand. In the observation room, two officers watched through the one-way glass. One of them shook his head. He's playing games. The other officer frowned. Or maybe he really believes what he's saying. Look at him, he doesn't look like a killer. He looks like... I don't know. Like he's waiting for something. Waiting for what? The officer didn't answer. He couldn't. Back inside, Harris opened the folder. Photos of the crime scene spilled across the table, blood, broken glass, and a terrified victim's face frozen forever. You recognize this? Harris asked. Daniel looked at the pictures but didn't flinch. His eyes lingered on one photo, then he closed them briefly, as if holding back emotion. I know who did this, he said quietly. Harris slammed his hand on the table. Then say it. Give me a name. Daniel looked him in the eye. You wouldn't believe me. Try me. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. He's inside your system. Watching you. Listening to you. He knows every move you make. Harris felt a cold chill crawl down his spine. He didn't show it, but those words hit deep. Hours passed. Questions kept coming, but Daniel gave no clear answers. He only spoke in pieces, fragments, like he knew more than he was allowed to say. Finally, Harris left the room in frustration. In the hallway, he muttered to another officer, "He's either insane or telling the truth. And I can't tell which one is worse." Then the phone rang. A sharp, urgent sound cut through the quiet station. An officer picked it up. The voice on the other end was deep, distorted, almost mechanical. "You've taken the wrong man," the caller said. "Let him go. Before it's too late." The officer froze. "Who is this?" Click. The line went dead. The station filled with tension. Officers exchanged nervous looks. Someone traced the call. Harris leaned in as the computer pulled up the location. When the result appeared, the room fell silent. The call had come from inside their own building. In the interrogation room, Daniel sat alone, his head tilted slightly as if he already knew. He whispered to himself, "He's here." The camera in the corner blinked red. Then, for just 1 second, it flickered. Static filled the feed before clearing again. In the observation room, one of the officers leaned forward. "Did you see that?" The camera. Suddenly, all the monitors in the station went black. Then, one by one, they lit up again, showing the same image. Not the feed from the interrogation room. Not security footage. Instead, a single message in blood-red letters. "You have the wrong man." Panic spread through the room. Officers rushed to check systems, shouting orders, trying to restore control. But the message stayed on every screen for a full minute before disappearing. Detective Harris rushed back into the interrogation room. "What do you know about this?" he demanded. Daniel looked at him calmly. "I told you. He's closer than you think." Harris slammed his fist against the table. "Who is he? How do we find him?" Daniel's eyes darkened. "You don't find him. He finds you." At that moment, another officer burst into the room, breathless. "Detective, we just got a report. Another attack. Same pattern. Same signature." Harris froze. "Where?" The officer handed him the note. Harris read it quickly. His face turned pale. The crime had happened just 20 minutes ago, while Daniel had been locked in the interrogation room under full watch. It was impossible. And yet, it was real. The station grew restless. Some officers started whispering that they had made a mistake. That Daniel wasn't guilty. That the real killer was still out there. But Harris wasn't ready to give up. He turned back to Daniel. "If you're not the killer, then what are you? Why were you watching him? Why all the codes and papers in your apartment?" Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady and cold. "Because I've been hunting him longer than you have. You think you arrested a suspect. But you arrested your only chance to catch the real monster." The room went silent. Harris stared at him, his mind racing. Was this man really their enemy, or the only person who could help them? Far away, in a dark room filled with screens, the true killer watched the chaos unfold. His voice was a whisper of amusement. "They don't know," he said to himself. "They're blind. And now, they're too late." On his screen, he watched Daniel in the interrogation room. He leaned closer, his smile wide. "Let's see how long you last, Daniel." The station felt heavier than before. The walls seemed to press closer, the air thicker, as if the building itself knew a mistake had been made. Detective Harris sat at his desk, staring at the new case report. Another victim. Same style. Same cruelty. The crime had happened while Daniel Cross was under lock and key. There was no way he could have done it. Yet the evidence still pointed at him. His apartment, those coded papers, the photos. It all screamed guilt. But the timing screamed innocence. Harris rubbed his tired eyes. His mind was a storm of doubt. Inside the interrogation room, Daniel sat quietly. He hadn't spoken in an hour. He just stared at the table, his fingers tapping slowly, like a clock counting down. When Harris finally walked in again, Daniel looked up. His eyes were sharp. "Do you believe me now?" Harris didn't answer. He sat down, opened a folder, and tried to sound strong. "We're still looking at you, Daniel. Evidence doesn't lie." Daniel leaned forward. His voice was calm but heavy. "Evidence can be planted. Lives can be destroyed. You should know that by now." Harris froze. "What do you mean?" Daniel's eyes softened, almost with pity. "You think you're in control. But he's been in your system from the beginning. He's been watching you, detective. Watching all of you." For the first time, Harris felt truly unsettled. Daniel spoke not like a criminal, but like someone carrying a burden. Someone who knew too much. In the observation room, Officer Miller watched through the glass. He muttered, "I don't like this. He's too calm. Either he's lying like a pro, or he's telling the truth, and we're the fools." Another officer scoffed. "Don't let him play with your head. He's dangerous." But Miller wasn't convinced. Something about Daniel's eyes, his voice, it didn't feel like the man sitting inside was a monster. It felt like he was hiding something deeper. Later that night, Harris returned to the evidence board. Pictures of victims, maps of the city, crime scene notes all pinned in place. His gaze fell on the witness sketch that had first led them to Daniel. The sketch did look like him. But now, staring harder, Harris saw differences. The jawline wasn't exact. The nose was slightly off. Maybe the witness had been scared, confused, and filled the gaps with Daniel's face. Maybe they had been wrong from the start. Harris's doubt grew heavier. Meanwhile, Daniel broke his silence. He leaned toward the observation glass and whispered, knowing they could hear him. "You want to know why I had those papers? Why I kept those notes?" The room on the other side went still. Officers leaned closer. Daniel's voice lowered. "Because I was following him. Because I knew what he would do. And because nobody else believed me." He raised his cuffed hand slowly, pointing toward the photos of crimes lying on the table. "Every mark, every detail, he leaves them for me. Not for you. For me. This is personal." The officers exchanged nervous glances. One whispered, "Personal? What does he mean by that?" Detective Harris returned, gripping a file tightly. "Let me ask you something, Daniel. Why do you know so much about these crimes? More than we do? More than you should?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because I've been there. Not as the killer, detective. As the shadow. I've walked the same streets. I've seen the same blood. I've been one step behind him for years." "Why?" Harris demanded. Daniel's face hardened. "Because he took something from me. Long ago. And I swore I would stop him before he took more." The room fell silent. The weight in Daniel's voice was real, raw, filled with grief. It didn't sound like a story. It sounded like truth. But Harris couldn't ignore the danger. "If what you're saying is true, then why didn't you come to us? Why didn't you go to the police before?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "I tried. Years ago. You didn't believe me then either. No one ever does. He's always one step ahead. He makes sure of it." Harris clenched his fists. His doubt was turning into fear. Suddenly, the station lights flickered. Screens in the control room glitched again. For a moment, every monitor showed static. Then, an image appeared, grainy, shaky, like it was filmed on an old camera. The footage showed a room. Blood on the walls. A body on the floor. And written above the body in red paint were the words, "He knows me." The officers stared in horror. Some whispered prayers under their breath. In the interrogation room, Daniel didn't look surprised. He only closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "He's mocking me. Detective Harris rushed in, his voice shaking with frustration. "What is going on here? Who is this man? Why is he taunting you?" Daniel opened his eyes slowly. "Because I'm the only one who understands him. The only one who can stop him. That's why he leaves me messages. That's why he plays these games." Harris's voice cracked. "If that's true, then why didn't he kill you already?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes burning. "Because he doesn't want to. Not yet. He wants me to suffer. He wants me to watch." In the observation room, Officer Miller's hands trembled as he spoke. "Detective, what if we really did arrest the wrong man? What if he's not our suspect at all, but the only lead we've got?" No one answered. The silence in the station was louder than any siren. That night, Harris went home but couldn't sleep. Daniel's words haunted him. "He's inside your system. He's closer than you think." Around midnight, Harris's phone buzzed. He picked it up and froze. A message glowed on the screen. "Detective Harris, I know where your daughter sleeps." His blood ran cold. He dropped the phone and raced to his daughter's room. She was safe, sleeping peacefully. But on the window, written in red marker, were 2 words. "Too late." Harris staggered back, his heart pounding. His mind was spinning with fear. Maybe Daniel Cross wasn't lying. Maybe everything he said was true. Detective Harris did not sleep that night. He sat in his daughter's room, a gun resting on the table beside him, his eyes fixed on the window. The red words, "too late," still glowed in his mind. He had wiped them away, but the fear remained burned into his chest. By morning, his decision was made. He could no longer treat Daniel Cross as just a suspect. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. At the station, officers gathered around as Harris entered. His face looked harder, older, as if one night had aged him years. "Where is he?" Harris asked. In interrogation, Officer Miller replied. "He hasn't slept. He just sits there, staring at the wall." Harris nodded and walked inside. Daniel lifted his head as the detective entered. His eyes were sharp, but his voice was quiet. "He's close, isn't he?" Daniel asked. Harris froze. "What do you mean?" Daniel tilted his head slightly. "He left you something, didn't he? A message." The detective clenched his jaw. He wanted to deny it, but Daniel's eyes told him there was no point. "Why you?" Harris demanded. "Why does he taunt you? Why not us?" Daniel leaned forward. His voice carried a weight of pain. "Because it started with me. Years ago. He didn't just kill strangers. He killed someone I loved. My brother. And when I tried to stop him, the police ignored me. So I followed him myself." For the first time, Harris saw the truth in Daniel's face. This wasn't just obsession. This was personal. Later, Harris gathered the team. "I want every piece of evidence rechecked. Every photo, every report, every witness statement. Look for holes. Look for anything that doesn't match." Officers rushed to work. Files opened, computers buzzed, and reports were read aloud. Slowly, the cracks began to appear. The DNA from Daniel's apartment didn't match the crime scenes. The fingerprints weren't a perfect fit either. The witness sketch was vague and flawed. Piece by piece, the case against him started to crumble. Officer Miller finally spoke up. "Detective, I think we arrested the wrong man." The room went silent. The words hung in the air like smoke. At that same moment, one officer entered the evidence room to pull Daniel's seized belongings. But when he opened the cabinet, his face turned pale. "Detective," he shouted. Everyone rushed in. The coded papers and photographs taken from Daniel's apartment were scattered on the floor. Some were missing entirely. Someone had been there. Someone had tampered with the evidence. How is that possible? Harris demanded. "This room is locked." But as the officers checked, they discovered something terrifying. The lock had not been broken. It had been opened from the inside with an official keycard. Which meant the killer wasn't just watching from outside. He had access to the station itself. In the interrogation room, Harris returned to Daniel, his voice low but urgent. "You were right. He's closer than we thought. He was inside our building." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Now do you believe me?" Harris didn't answer, but the look on his face said everything. Daniel leaned forward. "He's not just killing for pleasure. He's playing a game. A game with me. And now, with you." Harris swallowed hard. "Then help us. Tell us how to stop him." Daniel's voice was steady. "You'll never stop him with badges and rules. He knows your moves before you make them. If you want to catch him, you'll need me." That evening, the station grew tense. Officers double-checked every camera, every hallway, every shadow. Yet fear crept through the building like poison. Then, near midnight, the alarm blared. Everyone ran to the main hall. On the wall, in giant red letters, a message was written, fresh, wet, dripping. "You caught the wrong man." The paint was still running. Which meant the killer had been inside minutes ago. Chaos erupted. Officers searched the entire building, but no intruder was found. Doors were locked, cameras still rolling, yet somehow, he had been there. One officer whispered, "It's like he's a ghost." But Harris knew better. He wasn't a ghost. He was a man. A man who was always one step ahead. Back in the interrogation room, Daniel's face tightened as Harris told him about the new message. He didn't look surprised. Instead, he whispered, almost to himself, "He's enjoying this. He wants you to feel powerless." "Why us?" Harris asked. "Why not just keep killing?" Daniel's voice turned cold. "Because killing isn't enough for him. He wants to be seen. He wants to be feared. And now that you've arrested me, he has the perfect stage." Harris's chest tightened. For years, he had hunted criminals, but never like this. This wasn't just violence. This was theater. A deadly performance. As dawn approached, Harris stepped outside the station for fresh air. His mind was heavy, his body exhausted. But when he looked down at the ground near his car, his heart nearly stopped. On the windshield was a single photograph. He picked it up with trembling hands. It was his daughter, taken from outside his own house the night before. She was sleeping peacefully in her bed, unaware someone had been standing in the shadows, camera in hand. On the back of the photo were 3 words written in red ink. "She's next." Harris's knees weakened. He clutched the photo, his eyes burning with rage and fear. He stormed back inside and slammed the picture on the interrogation table in front of Daniel. "Tell me how to stop him," Harris shouted, his voice breaking. "Tell me before he takes her." Daniel's face hardened. He looked at the photo, then at Harris. "You finally understand," Daniel said quietly. "This isn't about me. It's about him. And the only way you'll save her is if you let me out." Far away, in his hidden room, the killer watched the chaos through hacked cameras. His lips curled into a smile. "They're desperate now," he whispered. "They'll have no choice but to set him free. And then, the real game begins." His finger traced Daniel's face on the screen. "Run, Daniel. Run. Let's finish what we started." The station was no longer just a workplace. It felt like a trap. Every creak in the hallway, every flicker of a light made the officers uneasy. They all knew it now, whoever the real killer was, he had been inside their walls, moving among them. Detective Harris stood in front of the board of evidence, his fists clenched. His daughter's photo sat in his pocket, heavy like a stone. He could still hear the words written on the back, "She's next." He turned toward the interrogation room. Daniel Cross was waiting, silent as always. Harris walked in and threw the chair across the room, his voice breaking. "Enough games. I know you're not him. But you know him. You've been chasing him. So stop holding back. Tell me who he is." Daniel didn't flinch. He looked at Harris with calm, steady eyes. "Now you're ready to listen." For the first time, Daniel began to tell the truth. His voice was low, his words slow, as if each one carried weight. "Years ago, I was part of something unofficial. Not police. Not government. A small group of us worked to track people like him, the ones who hide in plain sight, who kill not for rage, not for money, but for art. For fun. We called them ghosts. Because they could slip through systems, erase themselves, become invisible." Harris frowned. "And this one? The man we're hunting?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He was the best of them. Smarter than all the others. He learned how to turn the chase into a game. He leaves signs, taunts, messages, because he wants me to see them. He wants me to follow. "Why you?" Harris demanded. Daniel's eyes dropped for the first time. "Because I failed once. Years ago, when I first found him, I hesitated. And in that moment, he killed my brother. Right in front of me." The room grew heavy with silence. Even the camera seemed to hum quieter. Daniel's voice shook slightly, though his face stayed hard. "Since then, he's kept me alive on purpose. He doesn't just kill strangers. He kills to make me suffer. Every message he leaves? It's for me." Outside the glass, officers shifted uneasily. Some looked at Daniel with new sympathy. Others felt even more fear. Officer Miller whispered, "If this is true, then he's not a suspect. He's a survivor." But another officer muttered, "Or maybe he's just telling us what we want to hear." No one answered. Back inside, Harris pressed harder. "If you've been hunting him this long, then you must know who he is. You must have a name." Daniel shook his head. "No real name. He changes identities like masks. But I know one thing, he's close. He's been inside your station. Which means he's someone with access. Someone you trust." The words hit Harris like a blade. He thought of every officer he worked with. Every handshake. Every shared drink after long shifts. Could one of them be the monster? Hours later, Harris sat alone in his office, turning Daniel's words over in his mind. That was when Officer Miller entered, holding a new report. "Detective, you need to see this." Harris scanned the paper. His eyes widened. The fingerprints from the latest crime scene had finally come back. They didn't match Daniel. They matched someone else. But the name shocked him to his core. It was a name from inside the department. One of their own. Before Harris could react, the station went dark again. The power cut out, plunging the rooms into shadow. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. From the hallway came a scream. Officers ran toward the sound, guns drawn. Harris followed, his heart racing. They found Officer Grant lying on the floor, his throat cut, blood pooling beneath him. On the wall above his body, written in thick, dripping letters, were 2 words. "Still wrong." Chaos broke out. Officers shouted, searched every corner, but no intruder was found. Whoever had done this had vanished like smoke. Back in the interrogation room, Daniel sat chained to the table, hearing the commotion outside. When Harris burst in, Daniel only asked one question. "Who did he take?" Harris stared at him. "What do you mean?" Daniel's voice hardened. "Every time he kills inside your circle, he takes someone too. He leaves a body to distract you. Then he disappears with the real target." Harris felt ice in his veins. He ran back to the main hall, shouting names. Officers called out to confirm they were present. One by one, they answered. Until someone realized Officer Miller was missing. The search began immediately, but Miller was gone. His locker open. His phone left behind. And on the seat of his chair was a small device, a camera lens, still recording. Harris picked it up, and the screen lit. A video began to play. Miller was tied to a chair in a dark room. His mouth gagged, his eyes wide with terror. Behind him, a shadow moved into frame. The voice spoke, distorted but cruelly calm. "You keep chasing the wrong man. How many more will die before you listen to him?" The video ended. Harris's hands shook with rage. Around him, officers looked pale, broken. Daniel's voice echoed in his memory, "You'll never stop him with badges and rules." That night, Harris unlocked the interrogation room himself. He stood in the doorway, staring at Daniel. "You said I'd need you," Harris said, his voice heavy. "You were right. I can't stop him without you." Daniel stood slowly, the cuffs removed. His expression was unreadable. "Then let's finish this." Harris hesitated. "But understand this, if you cross me, if you lie, I'll put you down myself." Daniel nodded. "Fair enough. But if you want your daughter safe, you'd better trust me." As they left the station together, officers watched with disbelief. Their former suspect now walked beside their detective, free. Some whispered, "He's dangerous." Others said, "He's our only chance." But no one could deny one truth anymore. The killer wasn't outside. He was among them. Far away, in his hidden room, the killer leaned back in his chair, watching through hacked cameras. His laughter was cold, sharp. "They finally let him out," he whispered. "Good. Now the hunt begins." On the screen, he zoomed in on Harris and Daniel leaving the station. His voice turned into a hiss. "Come find me, Daniel. Let's see how many more bodies fall before you do." Night had fallen heavy over the city. The streets were quiet, but inside the police cars rolling in a convoy, hearts beat fast. Every officer knew this was it, the final hunt. Detective Harris sat in the front seat, his jaw tight, his eyes locked forward. Next to him sat Daniel Cross, free for the first time in days. The cuffs were gone, but the weight of suspicion still lingered in the air. Some officers still didn't trust him. Some never would. But Harris knew they had no choice. If they wanted to save Officer Miller and end this nightmare, they needed Daniel. "Where do we start?" Harris asked, his voice low. Daniel closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "He's been leaving me signs. Always signs. The coded notes, the blood messages, the video. It all points to one place." Harris leaned closer. "Where?" Daniel opened his eyes. "The old train yard. Abandoned for years. It's his stage. He wants us to come there. He wants me." Minutes later, the convoy rolled into the dark, empty train yard. Rusted carriages stood like grave markers, their windows shattered, their metal frames moaning in the wind. Floodlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows. The officers spread out, weapons raised, hearts pounding. Harris and Daniel moved together, leading the way. Every step echoed on the cracked concrete. Every shadow seemed alive. "This is his playground," Daniel whispered. "Be careful. He'll be watching us right now." As if on cue, a voice boomed through hidden speakers. Cold. Mocking. "Welcome, Daniel. Welcome, Detective. I've been waiting." The officers froze. Guns lifted. Eyes searched the darkness. The voice laughed. "So many of you, and yet so blind. I'm right here, and you'll never see me until I want you to." Suddenly, a scream cut the air. The officers spun around, one of their men had fallen, his throat slashed. No one had seen it happen. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the yard. Harris cursed under his breath. "He's moving through the shadows. He's toying with us." Daniel grabbed Harris's arm. "No, he's toying with me. He won't stop until it's just me and him. That's how he plays the game." Harris's chest tightened. Then we end it. Tonight. The voice came again, closer now. Daniel, do you remember the last time we met? Do you remember your brother's face when he begged for his life? You let him die. You failed him. And you'll fail again. Daniel's fists clenched, his knuckles white. Rage burned in his eyes, but his voice was steady. Not this time. The killer's laughter echoed, bouncing off the metal walls. Then a floodlight flicked on, illuminating the center of the yard. Officer Miller sat tied to a chair, gagged, eyes wide with terror. A knife glinted against his throat. Behind him stood a figure, masked, dressed in black. The killer. Step closer, Daniel, the voice hissed. Or I cut him open right here. Every officer raised their weapon, but Daniel lifted his hand. No. Don't shoot. That's what he wants. One wrong move, and Miller dies. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on the masked figure. Harris's voice was sharp. Daniel, stop. It's a trap. Daniel didn't turn. It's always been a trap. He walked into the light, hands raised, fearless. The killer pressed the knife harder against Miller's skin, a thin line of blood forming. Let him go, Daniel said, his voice firm. This is between you and me. It always has been. The killer tilted his head. Good. You finally understand. For a moment, time froze. The two men faced each other, the hunter and the hunted, though no one could tell which was which anymore. Then, with sudden violence, Daniel lunged forward. The knife slashed, sparks flew as it scraped against metal. Officers shouted, rushing forward, but Harris yelled, "Hold your fire. You'll hit Miller." The fight was brutal, raw. The killer moved with speed, striking like a shadow. Daniel countered with fury, every blow fueled by years of pain and loss. The knife cut into Daniel's side, blood blooming across his shirt. He groaned but didn't stop. He slammed the killer against the chair, breaking it apart, freeing Miller. Run! Daniel shouted. Miller scrambled away, collapsing into the arms of waiting officers. Now it was just them. Daniel and the killer. The knife flashed again, slicing across Daniel's arm. Blood dripped onto the concrete. But Daniel fought back harder, driving the killer backward, blow after blow. Finally, with a roar, Daniel ripped the mask from the killer's face. Gasps erupted around the yard. It was Officer Reed, one of their own. The man who had stood beside them for years, who had shared drinks, who had laughed at their jokes. His face twisted now with madness and hate. Why? Harris shouted, stepping forward, his voice breaking. Why, Reed? Reed's smile was chilling. Because none of you ever saw me. None of you ever knew me. Daniel saw me. And that made the game worth playing. Daniel, bleeding heavily, didn't hesitate. He lunged again. The fight raged on, but Reed's strength was monstrous. With a brutal shove, Reed drove the knife deep into Daniel's stomach. Daniel staggered, blood soaking his shirt. Harris screamed, raising his gun, but Daniel raised his hand weakly. No, he's mine. With his last strength, Daniel grabbed Reed by the throat, slamming him against the metal frame of an old train car. His voice was a whisper of fury. This ends tonight. With a final surge, Daniel twisted Reed's own knife, driving it into his chest. Reed's eyes widened in shock. His body went limp, sliding to the ground. The yard fell silent. Daniel dropped to his knees, his hands pressed against his bleeding stomach. Harris rushed to him, catching him before he fell. Stay with me, Daniel. We'll get you help. Just hold on. Daniel's eyes were dimming, but a faint smile touched his lips. You see. Harris. I told you. I wasn't the monster. His voice weakened. Tell my brother. I finished it. And with that, his eyes closed. His body went still. The officers stood in silence. Some had tears in their eyes. Even the hardest among them felt the weight of his sacrifice. Officer Miller, alive because of Daniel, whispered, "He saved us all." Harris's hands shook as he lowered Daniel's body to the ground. His chest burned with guilt and grief. He looked at the other officers, his voice rough but strong. "Remember this. We arrested the wrong man. We doubted him. But in the end, he was the only one brave enough to stop the real monster." Later, as dawn broke over the city, Harris stood alone at the train yard, watching the sunrise. He pulled Daniel's coded notes from his pocket, holding them tight. "Rest easy," he whispered. "The game's over." But deep inside, he knew the scars would never heal. The station, the city, and his own heart would forever remember the night they arrested the wrong man and lost the one who had saved them.